Mask up, Andy.
Yeah,
What's that?
Said mask up.
Oh, mask up. All right.
No. Take it off. Take it off. It's worse.
Well, hello everyone. We are back again for another episode of Cloud Simplified.
Hello.
Joining, got Matthew Puckett joining me again.
Yeah, how you doing?
Good. Looks like you're deep in your layer. In fact, I think I see a cable unplugged back there that might be a problem.
Don't pay attention to this. This has nothing to do with what's going on today, okay? Absolutely nothing. That's not
Is
Azure.
it bad if all the fans are stopped? Is that bad?
Oh, they are? Oh, no. Oh, again, there's nothing to see. Nothing here. Nothing here.
So we have joining us today again, Andy Wahrenberger, our esteemed colleague and peer, that will be talking to us a little bit more about Azure Front Door and how that can solve all the world's problems when you have a website that suddenly gets hammered with all kinds of traffic. And
I had to give him $20 to come back. It wasn't because of you.
I know.
All right.
Yeah, it was a tough sell.
Yeah, it was only $20.
A tough sell, but anything for the team, man, and $20.
Yeah, Ryan, you owe me half of that now.
Yeah. So I know, last episode you talked a bit about, situations that might necessitate the need for something like Azure Front Door and how that can sit in front of a website and how it can help in accelerating and offloading traffic against a web server to use our cloud capabilities to be able to enhance a web application. I know we didn't, for the sake of time and brevity of the show, we didn't want to dive into great detail and chop that up a bit. So definitely interested to see what you have to show us today.
Well, yeah, great. I mean, I think last time we focused on what happens when something bad happens, right? What can I do to help something when something bad happens? And what I wanted to talk about today a little bit more is like, what do you get? What are some of the advanced things that you get when you put Front Door in? There's a, when you.
I was gonna say, you don't let Ryan Berry through it. That's the first thing you don't do.
Man.
You just, when Brian Berry shows up, you just go, no, click, deadbolt, don't let him in. That's good.
Yeah, I've been known to go door to door and
door to door.
What are you selling?
Front door to front door.
Right. Yeah.
Sending some pizzas.
Got some kids that are gonna be entering college soon. Gotta do what you can. Hold out that tin cup.
Well, yeah. I mean, it is real, right? But so one of the things that that you get when you get in the Front Door is that you have something that sees every request that's being made to your website. And what's great about that is that we log everything. Well, I shouldn't say everything. There's a couple things like the body payloads and some of the header values you won't log, but you'll get the sense of like which parts of your website are getting hit. What's the response times that are coming back, or what status codes, right? Am I having problems? There's all sorts of ways to monitor that with applications, but there's also some great insights. There's also the other part of Front Door, which is also interesting, is putting a web application firewall in, which allows you to, it's a way of it's extra level of security, right? So it looks at the actual HTTP request. There are several different kinds of attacks out there that people have scripts and software for that, when they're bored or, whatever they want to do, right, they'll execute to see what they can do or what they can get into. And the WAF is something that can help
inject all kinds of stuff into the query string and try to do SQL injection attacks.
Ryan Berry keeps ringing your doorbell.
Any and all of those things, really.
Yeah, the infamous Ryan Berry attack is like the massive refresh, right?
Yeah, it sounds like I want to WAF. Everybody should WAF.
Yeah, so let me. I'm going to dig in a little bit to what some of the logs and some of the visualizations you can do. I've pre-built a few queries here so that we don't have to suffer through my typing. Just as you're looking at a Front Door resource inside of Azure. And all the blades, like all the Azure resources as you go down the screen, you'll see logs, right? And this is this is going to be the place that you can get in and query the logs for, the specific resource. The diagnostic settings is where you can start actually like forwarding them to a log analytics. You can forward them down to event hubs. There's a lot of things you can do there. As you start seeing the next round of monitoring going through Azure, the diagnostic settings and where you can ship things to will start evolving. But what?
So backing up to just for a split second, this is a web application hosted in how many Azure regions?
Oh yeah, so this is one of our internal tools that we use for the CSAs here at Microsoft. It's hosted in North and South Central the United States.
Okay.
And
there's a front door in front of it.
It absolutely has a front door. We so we have a worldwide population of cloud solution architects at Microsoft that use this from from several continents, and we made a decision to not geographically disperse all of our compute and our storage, our ODS, and centralize and use front door to make that experience as close to as the United States experience is to all over the world. And it's one of the strategies, right? It's like when you try to scale out a website, you bring the website closer to the user when it comes to like the compute and the content and other things. The other way is normalize and accelerate the network calls between that user and your website, and that's what front door does for you.
Okay.
So we're looking at logs, and this is the Custo queries, right? That we have we've standardized all the logs on, and you'll see this idea, right, that things have kind of started to centralize under activity diagnostics and metrics across all the different resources, and that's where the category gets really important inside of like especially looking at diagnostics. So what we're doing here is we're saying, the front door access logs are, if you think of like a web log, right, the one that has every single request, that's the front door access log. So
is that like in a W3C format? Is it just has kind of typical fields that you would see in a web log?
Yeah, it has. So we can take a look at it real quick. And what's great about the way that this editor works is it's all type ahead. So I'll say where, right? We'll do another filter, and if I guess where we have to do like this, right? This is why I talked about not doing the typing. You see all these helper here's, right? These fields. You can look at client IPs. Client IPs is a very interesting discussion when it comes to this. But since this is merged in with, Azure Diagnostics is merged in with all the different kinds of resources, sometimes you see things like a database name. That doesn't make sense for web. Well, that's because it's not applicable. And so, one common thing to do is we won't summarize it. Let's just go ahead and run this. Oh, gotta highlight it. We'll run it. And presto, we have stuff. So we'll just kind of move this up a little bit, because what you can do is you can expand out here, and you start looking down at the different fields. The ones that will show up here are the ones that are filled out. So you'll see things like, this is a front door access log, since I filtered on it, obviously. The resource, some other pieces of data. Then you get into some of the specific things like, hey, this is a request.
So if I was doing a filter and I was using the type ahead, I could use the left column there just to help start pulling out those different areas if I wanted to refine my search. Oh, look at that. You're so special. Look at you.
Yeah.
Oh, did you break it?
Yeah, well, that's what it's like. It's like it pops somewhere. It's kind of weird. But we'll just go ahead and rerun that, because I don't know what it's supposed, but you're right. It's supposed to kind of pop it up in there. Let's go ahead and take that.
Probably just did a filter in the results.
Yeah. But that's cool though, because by trade I am not a query guy, right? And one of the things I struggled sometimes using this tool, and oftentimes I hear a lot of this from our customers, is where is my canned reports? And we're like, no, the power is, and you can build your own. And they're like, their head explodes because now all of a sudden they're overwhelmed, right? It's like, Cool.
Yeah, but what's interesting about build your own, right? It's that there's so many different things that go into a modern solution, right? When you're thinking like, well, it's just a website.
It's just
Well,
a
is
website.
it just a website?
It's just Matt Puckett.
Right. Well, it's just my pocket. Well, yeah, okay. We're not going to go there.
Yeah,
That's a
is
whole other
G-rated.
session.
Right.
But when you think of like, I have a front door. In this case, we're using the app services in Azure to host the website. We're using Cosmos DB as the ODS as our backend.
Yeah.
We have a series of functions, and then we also have SQL reporting that the functions populate from Cosmos, and a couple other nooks and crannies. There's a storage account that's involved, and so when you start thinking of like these different pieces, my website's actually a combination of all these different things.
Yeah.
And someone would say, well, but that means, so I have to have all these things for Azure to work? Well, if you think of on-premise, so I have a physical box or a couple physical boxes that run maybe a hypervisor, and I put virtual machines for websites there. Then I put a virtual machine for SQL there. Well, the rack there, you have blades that have basically CPU, memory, network on there. You probably have attached storage for your database, right? You start looking at breaking down all those different items that you should be monitoring in a holistic way.
Right.
Well, there's a lot of things that go into than just my website and database. In Azure, we give you services to make it easier.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So
and then the part that also might be in front of all that stuff you just talked about might be things like, an F5 or some sort of load balancer. So which this could be kind of akin to.
Right, and I didn't even touch into like you think of all the network gear that goes into even a modest data center, right? You talk about IPS. You have various levels of basically network ingress protection, right? A series of firewalls, maybe even something outside of the firewall, depending on which kind of a data center that you have. Then you get into an F5 device, which is doing the routing. And then that gets maybe to a load balancer potentially, or directly to the VMs. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, and all the network switches that are involved and the power. So in any case, what's nice about the way that we've done the logging is that now you can build your own dashboards to say, I want to see how CSA Hub is doing.
Oh, holistically. Oh, yeah, I got you.
Holistically. Yeah. There's a couple things that I care about. So one of the things, right, I'm just going to real basic thing to say is like, look, I want to see in the last 7 days what kind of status codes I'm getting. So here's a query, right, that we're going to go and take a look at all of the different status codes, basically all the requests grouped by status code. So it's a common thing to kind of say like, hey, how are we doing, right? 200s and 300s are what you're looking for. Those are the things that generally mean good good requests. Sometimes like a 204 where there's no data, sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad based on the way that you write the website. But once you get in the 4 and the 500s, that's where it gets a little interesting, right? So what we're gonna do is we went through and summarized it by status codes. I'm gonna order it by the status code so we can just kind of look at them, right? So say, okay, so looks like I got some baddies here, right? Yeah, I mean 401s. So depending on how the website's created, right, the authentication mechanism, 401s might not be bad. It could be that initial hit when someone says, I want to see this website, and it goes, I'm sorry, you're not authenticated, and then it issues a redirect and you go and log in.
Well, that's reflective of, I mean, that'd be like statistically 1 out of 10,000, who cares, right? 1 out of 10, maybe you need to look at, right?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, but you got 66,200s, so 400 and whatever it was, 401s, or 126 401s, I couldn't see that as being problematic.
Yeah, so
he's about to show me some more magic. Let me show Puckett what we're doing.
Well, let's see. I think it's this. Is a status detail? There's a field in here that's that's a status detail. The status code. Well, I'm blanking on, but there was one here that gives you like a family that gives you like 400s, 500s, and those other things, right? We'll just stick
okay.
with the status
Grouped them
code.
up. That's pretty cool. Okay.
Mhm.
Interesting.
Yeah. So,
Oh, I like
so what I
shiny
like to,
graphs.
yeah. So what I like to do is take one of these guys, right? And you're
Yeah.
like, oh, well, take one of these, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna say, all right, where's my publish button? There's pin to a dashboard. So I'm going to create a new dashboard. Let's see, browse, create new dashboard. I'm going to put that in a play account, and then we'll call this. Let's see, we'll call this CSA Hub Fun, right?
Yeah.
And so when I do this, it's going to create a new dashboard resource, and then we're going to go ahead and I'll open up the browser, and all of a sudden now I have a little widget here, and that's kind of fun.
Fancy.
You think about that. You see all those pictures of all the monitors in a typical data center operation.
Yeah,
you can quickly build that sort of view here.
Been there, done that. Yeah, this would have been nice.
And so we're going to call this request by status code, right? We're just going to, request by status code, and we're not going to give it a subtitle. We're just going to make it a big one here. Oh, fine. We'll call it CSA Hub just because. And then we'll publish the change, right?
Yeah.
So you have options to do every hour, and then the past times, and there's a way, a lot of times it's like UTC is great and everything, but I would rather see things in my local time.
Yeah.
And then as you're looking at this, right, you have 11,200s, and then it starts falling off here, right? And it's a nice little visual. These are the I used to have an executive at one of my previous spots that we built a bunch of these dashboards, hung some TVs, and he used to refer to it as the 2-second glance, right?
Oh yeah, no, I get that. Yeah.
I want to see if I'm okay in 2 seconds.
Yep. Space shuttle's okay. Don't worry about it. We're good. Everything's nominal.
Okay, so now what happens is as we looked at this one here, right, we have status codes. We had some 500s. When we looked at the actual results, right, there were some 500s. They weren't significant, but we're looking to get better. Yeah. So now what we can do is we can say, okay, well, we're going to find everything for the front door access logs, everything where the status code, and what's fun is the status code is a string, right? So we can say where it starts with 50, summarize it by the request, and then we're going to order it by count. And so this is going to start showing us, all the different URLs that are starting to have problems. Now, this isn't a replacement for like App Insights, right? App Insights is going to give you, or any other of the APMs, detailed information about, what is happening on the website, what's happening in the code. But this is also another little good indicator to say, all right, well, which URLs are we having problems? Well, it looks like 34 people had problems signing in. Well, that looks a little interesting. So we should go take a look at it. Again, I get a query. I like it, right? So we're going to go and tab CSA Hub Fund. I'm going to apply it. Go over here. We'll refresh. Right, and all of a sudden, now I have, this. And now what's great is that all of these reports, once this is done loading, will look at these different markers here. So you could set up like today's dashboard, and then maybe the weekly dashboard or other things, right?
Okay. Yeah.
We'll let that one load in the background here. I'm not going to sit here and wait here.
So what's the cost of that, by the way? Just as an aside, because not everything is cheaper in the cloud, right? Help me. So as those reports are running in the background, I understand the data is sitting off in the log analytics sync.
Yep.
So where does the cost come in for the refresh of the report itself? Is there any?
No, I mean, running the reports doesn't cost you anything. What does is the storage.
No, I figured that. Yeah. Well, sure. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Just making sure.
Well, sir, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to just make sure my pennies are going the long distance. Okay.
Right. Yeah. He didn't want to have to start a door-to-door campaign like I do for college tuition.
I don't want that tin cup experience like that.
Yeah.
Well, and that's it's interesting, right? Because the storage is one of the, when you look at the primitives costs in a cloud, right? You're like processor, memory storage.
Right.
And we're not talking about like the super fast, awesome storage. We're talking like, like commodity storage, network. Storage is one of the least expensive things.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's a great way, you can on the diagnostic settings and then the log analytics spaces, you can start adjusting what the longevity, how much you want to keep the data around. And that's another way you can do cost control. So now the other aspect that's interesting too is along the lines of the 2-second view is it's not only what URLs are having problems, but when are they happening, right? So what you can do is summarize, these same things starts with 500 or 50. You summarize the count. You do this little bin time generated is the time that the log entry happened, which is right as the web hit happened, and you slice it up in 1 hour buckets, and then you get these the bar charts. You got a lot of little choices here. You can go lines, right? That's kind of weird. I mean, so this isn't like a static item, but what's fun about a line is this 1H or 1 hour, we could say 5 minutes, right? So switch that over to 5 minutes. We're gonna have to go. We'll re-swills this, and you can see a little bit more ebb and flows. You can adjust the granularity there, but generally for something like this, the unstacked column, maybe a 30-minute or an hour. It's going to really depend on how big, how much data you want to show in that one. In that one bucket, right? Because when you look at a dashboard, it's all about real estate. Visuals, you want it to grow, go out and grab people. We're gonna go and make this do local time again, and as with everything else, we will pin this to our favorite dashboard. And
so to make sure I understood, Andy, that the slicing was just the collection in 30 minutes, not at 30 minutes what was the errors. It's a total representation of a 30-minute.
Correct. Yeah, it's a grouping. It's a grouping of like that last 30 minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
And this one seems to be not happy, but that's okay. We'll come back and play with this here in a little bit if we have time. But you get the idea, right? Is
totally.
When kind of like we were talking about before, Matt, is like these queries, especially if whether you're in software development or you're doing automated infrastructure development, right? There's so many languages and things that you have to learn. This is yet another language, right? That you have to know.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, personally, I have I have a cheat sheet of things that I either save in one of my workspaces or I have like a OneNote.
Yeah.
You can save those queries. In fact, actually, we should probably put in the show notes. I have a PDF with a bunch of kind of tips and tricks for being able to get into this.
Yeah, don't be stingy, Ryan.
Yeah, he's been hiding that.
I've asked him several times.
Totally using that.
I gotta hold my resources hostage to make sure I look like the hero. You guys,
That's not possible. Nobody takes you serious. Oh.
Yeah, we're gonna make this look more interesting. We're just gonna do 7. We're gonna do 7 days, and you can see here, right? Are you having good and bad days, right? And you can you can get into here, and like when these things, you can actually if you hit this little guy here, it'll make it go full screen, and then you can come back to the logs to kind of look at it. So
let me think about this a little bit more. So you said this application is running in two Azure regions, and this is showing the front door logs. So the response code from the web server behind whatever region the request ended up going to. So he wanted to click down into that farther on the app server instance, or maybe even correlate. Maybe when a user is sent to South Central US, there's more problems that occur. That of a 500 or 50x. Yeah.
What's your geography experience, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
Right.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see here. Do we have the back end?
Way to put it on the spot.
Yeah. No, it's so this is one interesting one. This when you talk about caching sent to Origin Shield. Origin Shield is that first level cache that if we have 160 plus points of presence around the world, you don't want to have 160 of them refresh their cache. You want really the first one to get in there, cache it, and then everyone
Gotcha.
feeds off of that. So
So
it's a multi-level.
Yeah, I see server instance name on there. That looks
Well,
like
I mean,
it might be telling.
well, I mean, there's only one way to find out, right?
All right.
Well, here, I got an idea. Let us just do this. Let's just look at the last 30. Was it? Top 10, right? We'll just get the top 10 here. Oh, it doesn't. Doing something. We'll just run the last 30 minutes and take a look at one of the examples here, to see what if we can find, which back end that this request went to. I have a feeling. Oh, here we go. Backend host name. Okay.
Oh,
there you go.
Look at that.
So the North Central. Okay.
Oh,
so
now you could.
Yeah. So now is the I know that there's an identifier on the application insights, the correlation ID. Is there a way to be able to connect those two? The log on the web server to the front door log?
There is
like a primary key, kind of a keying that between the two.
Yeah. I'm just thinking like a typical, line of troubleshooting that one would need to do. So you understand you have problems, but now you've got, in our case, it's 2 locations, but a customer could conceivably have, many, different parts of the world, or trying to drill into where the problem actually is.
Oh, that's
yeah. They're right here. The tracking reference is one of the things, and that when you look at, I believe there is a header that comes through. There's several headers that come through from front door.
So that would go to your web server. And now if you're using a tool like Application Insights to look into, let's say that it was a 500 error because of a bad SQL query or something like that, and and it was happening, and when users were routed to North Central, you could look at the Application Insights for that North Central instance and kind of correlate the two.
Yeah,
very cool. Okay,
I think we could probably include a link of there's a good documentation page on Docs that talk about all the headers that come down. That we could include. But yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of goodies that you get coming down from front door, but also coming back from front door as well to help you diagnose those issues.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, cool.
So I noticed client IP. You said that was an interesting one. Why is that an interesting field?
Well, so the client IP isn't always the originating IP of the user, right? So anytime an HTTP request is forwarded through a proxy, right? Front door is effectively a proxy. You start getting into, basically multiple client IPs, because technically the client IP is where the connection to the server is made from. One of the security benefits of something like front door is that it splits the connection. So the term line of sight to the server, it's breaking the line of sight. So you can't establish a connection and start streaming bits or doing some, we'll just say fun things, with the server.
So the end user doesn't have any visibility to that, what instance necessarily they're hitting, even though it is logged clearly, but they don't have any notion of that because front door's answering for us.
I see.
Yeah.
So last hop is never exposed. That's interesting.
Yeah, and so that it puts the onus on the proxy, right? And that's where like F5s, Nginx, there's a lot of hardware, or Barracudas. There's a lot of appliances. You can put IIS boxes out there running something called application request routing, that also acts as a layer 7 proxy. And so that's where, or the application gateway in Azure, those things will split the connection. And so a request will come in. It does kind of like a handoff, and front door and a lot of these other layer 7 proxies will actually create a connection pool backwards, right? And so you might be getting hit with thousands and thousands of users, but there's only like 100 connections going to your back end, which is super efficient. And what happens is that when the response comes back, the response, that stream is then kind of hooked up to that connection, and then it shoots out. So it doesn't buffer the whole thing inside a front door. It kind of acts as a kind of an intermediary. But then that means, right, then is let's say, your, client IP is 123.4 and you hit front door, then front door hits the website, right? The website, if it says, what's the client IP, it's going to be the front door, the edge instance of the front door. And
it just makes weblogs a little bit more interesting. So,
right.
Yeah.
And that's where there's so x-forwarded4 is the generic header that generally all proxies follow. And then also front door puts a specific one out there to give you the specific client IP that hit front door. So, and that's where, it's always an interesting thing, because over the years, and I'm old, so I can say it's over the years. I'm actually ancient when it comes to web term.
Back in my day, we used to.
Yeah, back in my day, I had to climb up both ways when we shelled out an XE
14.4 modem.
That's right. And so, right, when a lot of folks, before the advent of WAFs and before the advent of a lot of the things that we have now, implemented their own forms of security inside of the apps. And a lot of times people would just like, well, I'm going to look at the client IP, and if it matches, like if the first 6 characters match this, right, and actually put that in application code, and as soon as you put a proxy in front of it, all that stuff's worthless. That's why I said it's interesting, unless you follow some of the headers. But so this is fun, right? I mean, these are the access logs. A lot of great things you can do with these. You can export them out, but also, instead of having to figure out, like, let's say you have a large website that's distributed over multiple regions and you have multiple instances, and you're like, oh man, I got to take all these logs, I got to like put them somewhere, and then I got to coalesce them. It's like, you don't have to do that if it's coming through front door. Just get front door's log. Now, if we have some time, you want to talk about the WAF a little bit? Okay, so let's take a look a little bit about the logs now, looking at what the WAF would generate. So that web application firewall, that's the one that's, inspecting each one of the requests for a lot of known attack patterns, right? I think we talked about it earlier. Query strings are a popular one. Sometimes the size, right? Like you can do your own custom rules inside of a web application firewall. And you could say, well, if a request is over X number of bytes, don't let it in. And there's all sorts of things that you can do in the WAF. But ultimately, it's going to look, and we're going to look at this against Azure Diagnostics. The category is the front door web application firewall log. That's kind of a royal name, right? Really big. That's why you keep a couple of these queries, you copy and paste and munge them as you go, right? And so a WAF has, or the Azure one, the one inside of front door, it has a detection and prevention mode, right? Detection means I'm going to have a bunch of rules, and even if it says block, I'm not going to block. I'll log that I would block it,
right?
But I'm not going to actually block that connection.
It's a good way to kind of make sure they're not overly aggressive, kind of see what's going on.
Exactly.
Try new rules out too, right? I don't know what's going to happen this one.
Right.
And it's a way that you can have, basically the WAF run, inspect, and then kind of tell you. And this is where when you enable a WAF, you're generally going through review cycles multiple times throughout a day or the first week or two to see about what would or would not, and then you start adjusting rules on or off after you put it from prevention into detection mode. Another way to do it is that you always put the WAF in prevention mode, and you mark all the rules in what's called logging mode, right? So instead of saying block these things or allow, and then we'll have everything off and it's a big light switch, you go, all right, well, we're going to have everything we think is going to block or we want to block, we're going to make it log. And then we'll put it in prevention mode. And then after we find that a rule is good, like, I'll show you an example of here that, the CSA Hub doesn't, it uses Cosmos. So generally a lot of the SQL attacks really don't affect it.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it can, because, we do, Cosmos does support a SQL API, which allows you to do SQL-like queries.
Right.
But we've gone, we've engineered it in such a way that we don't, we do the due diligence up front, right? So when we take a look at this, right? So like this, for example, 24 hours, the action, right, is like, did it block, log, or allow? And this just shows, right? Again, it's really nice little thing here, right? And I won't, for time purposes, not going to post it up the dashboard, but again, this is another good one that's a pie chart, right? What's been
I like
pie. I was assuming Punch and Pie would be part of this meeting, right? So that's a great pie chart, and again, this is a good 2-second eyeball thing to say, are we doing okay? When it comes to the rules.
Yeah, so I see a lot of them are blocked.
Yeah, a lot of them are blocked. So that might be okay, right? It really depends on the profile. If you have a lot of rules that are allow, then you would expect a lot of allow. I'm stingy, so I have we're either going to block you or log you, right? And allow is something like search engines and stuff, right? Is generally a good one.
Got it.
All right. So then the next thing is like, okay, so like we had a lot of block. Well, I want to know what blocked, right? And now this is where we're going to filter the same rule, set by the action, and then we're going to look at the rule name. Now, the last part of the rule name is the OWASP official number for that, right? So OWASP is it's a
tier standards.
Yeah, it's an open. Go ahead.
Well, it's a WEF reference standard that tells you these are the common rule sets that from a CIS standard that you would look at.
That everybody needs to look at.
Yeah, everybody uses that. Yeah.
Cross-site scripting, I see. SQL injection. And those are common exploits.
Remote code execution. Yeah, and that's where the OWASP front door supports the OWASP 1.0 rule set standard. And it's constantly evolved. But this one, that's where that number comes in. So you can look it up and like, well, what is that?
Oh, cool.
But like I said, what's interesting as I go through this is like, okay, it's blocking the SQL ones, and it's good, right? Someone's trying to do something weird because we don't have SQL. Don't know why, but it's popping. So then what we do is we take a look and we say, okay, I want to see every one of the rules, and this one is a little bit more in detail because what we did is we started digging into it. We found that a couple things, like we have something to keep basically the app needs to ping the server every once in a while because of the way that it updates. So it's got this little ping guy, and it was coming up as a robot attack, and it's like, no, we're okay. We like that one, so we're not going to worry about that one. And then basically the sign-in was also doing something kind of weird too. So what we did is we said, look, I want to see everything that's not SQL, that's this not contains, right? That's the way you do a not SQL and not one of these guys. And then I want you to group it by URL and then by the rule and show me like what is blocking what, right? And as you see, it looks like, like apparently the way we're doing headshots is like coming up cross-site scripting. The app shows the little picture, right, from Microsoft Graph, right, to say like, ooh, we know who you are. Here's a picture of you. Apparently that's
watching.
But then this is also another great way to go like, do I have a problem in the way that maybe I've structured the particular request? Like this one here that's sending in a null, that looks generally weird. But then the other way you look at it is, what are people trying to do that I'm blocking? Right? And where do I need to go, right? Do I need to get a little bit more interesting with my security posture, right? And then start doing some more interesting things. So that was some really quick things on the WAF. A lot of great possibilities, and like with all the other Azure Monitor products, because the logs and the diagnostics can all feed in Azure Monitor. All that can be then streamed into your own SEIM or whatever other security tools that you have.
Oh, cool. So,
he did it again. There's Andy.
Yeah.
What a man.
Yeah. So,
Yes.
you know, it's interesting when you start connecting the dots and kind of see, you know, how you can take something that could be overly complex from an application architecture deployment standpoint and be able to have, you know, lots of lenses of visibility into the application and how it's behaving, and really at an inexpensive, you know, path. You said that all you're paying for here is storage. It's, you know, it's a great option to be able to kind of, yeah.
Super nice.
Yeah, and just
All right.
and just to kind of sum up real quick, you know, these are things that you find a couple of examples and then you discover and you explore,
Right.
right?
Yep.
And there's there's generally not a lot of people that are Kusto experts. They just have a lot of examples and they're fast on the recall. Just saying.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Andy. You know, looking forward to maybe having you on again. And you know, I know we mentioned the CDN stuff. You know, that's a whole another you know, topic of discussion. But it'd be great to kind of see how you set up and configure that and be able to use that in your application.
I can see it now. Don't call it a comeback, Andy.
Yeah.
Triple threat.
Man, now you got that song stuck in my head. Thank you for that.
All right, guys.
All right.
Take care.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
We'll see you.